Vermont is home to many strange cryptids: pigman, big head, large cats, the hopping horror, puckwudgies, even Champ, the Lake Champlain monster, which is a big lake monster and very popular in Vermont. But it's also home to one of the most famous cryptids of all, Bigfoot. So this episode, I'm going to be looking at some Bigfoot sightings in the Green Mountain State. So join us, won't you, for some Bigfoot sightings in Vermont. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. This week, I'm doing a viewer-requested episode. We're going back to New England. I've spent a lot of time covering New England lately, but one state I really haven't touched too much is Vermont. So this week's episode was requested by audience members Buddha Tooler 2012 and Paul Intro 2568. So thank you both for requesting I cover some Bigfoot sightings in Vermont. Like I said, I've done a lot of New England stuff. I've done Maine, Massachusetts, lots of Connecticut. The last couple of weeks, I've been doing Connecticut and UFO crashes into Bantam Lake. But this week, we're talking some Bigfoot sightings in Vermont, and particularly northern Vermont. We're going to do two counties, and hope you guys will stick with us. And I'm going to read these stories and then sort of take them apart, analyze them a little bit, give you my thoughts on what these people may or may not have seen. So let's get to it. Some Bigfoot stories from Vermont. Okay, and as I usually do, before we get into the Bigfoot stories, I want to just give you a little bit of geography of what we're looking at here. So this is Vermont, and you can see the two counties I'm going to cover tonight up here in the north, Chittenden and Lamoille. And, you have New York to the west, you have New Hampshire to the east, you have Massachusetts to the south, and Quebec is up here to the north. It is the only New England state that is landlocked. So all the other ones touch the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. So Vermont is landlocked. I hear it's beautiful there. I've never been to Vermont, but I would love to get up to Vermont and go to Lake Champlain and maybe see the Lake Champlain Champ monster. But yeah, tonight we're talking about Chittenden and Lamoille, and I hope I'm pronouncing these correctly. I did some research, but I'm sure if I'm not, you guys will let me know in the comments below. But let us get to some Bigfoot sightings. Okay, so story number one this week comes to us from Chittenden County. Stranded motorists observe white creature near Colchester. This is from November, so winter 1984, Chittenden County. Location details. This is near Colchester, Vermont, Route 2. And observed, she says, November 1984, between 12 and 1 a.m., the night my niece was born. There was a snowstorm. My brother-in-law had a custom car and wanted to go home to Milton to switch to his older car because of the sudden snow. My husband, brother-in-law, nephew, 3 years old, and myself drove from Milton. We were headed to my house in Winooski. We got as far as Colchester, there's some spelling errors in here, when the snow got real bad and the car slid into a ditch. My nephew began to cry and scream, so we flagged down a truck to bring me and my nephew to my house to call a tow truck. I left my husband and brother-in-law in Colchester. So no cell phones at this time. They're kind of out late at night. There's snow. My husband said while they were waiting, they started to hear noises in the woods, like trees breaking. Then they heard something that was coming in their direction, but then it was stomping on two legs. They could hear breaking trees coming closer. My husband is a hunter, and he said you could tell it was walking on two legs. They backed away from the side of the road to the other, couldn't run because the road was too slippery. So a hunter, you learn to, hear animals in the woods, when it's a deer or a bear and when it's a person. And a biped walking on two legs sounds different than quadrupeds, animals walking on all fours. So he knew that this was on 2 feet. She says, yeah, they only had on sneakers, so it was a little slippery in the snow. Meanwhile, it kept on getting closer. It was starting to part the trees when the tow truck came, and they heard it running back into the woods, breaking everything in its path. My husband was very scared. They both were, and told me what had happened. I half believed them. The next day, I drove through the same place and looked around as I drove. I saw fields and woods and thought it looked too peaceful and really thought they were nuts. I had to pick up my husband in Milton. I had my daughters with me, 10 and 13. I was pregnant at that time. Anyway, I got to Milton. Later that night, we headed back to Winooski. Well, wouldn't you know it, it started to snow really hard like the night before, and it was 12 a.m. So Same time of night, same conditions, same basic area. We started to go through the same spot as the night before, and I started to tell my husband about me looking around earlier, and there was nothing. When there it was, it just crossed the road and started to go up a hill. It was staring at us with one foot on a wire fence, holding the wire down with its arm and just staring at us. It was not brown, but white with yellow, dirty streaks, and his eyes, oh, how they scared me. They were reflecting a yellow/amber color, like the yellow on caution lights. A huge man, it was at least 10 feet tall, arms very long, his fur was long. On his face, the only flesh part that didn't have fur was his eyes and the upper cheeks. So almost like he had a beard or something. My husband started to slow down to get a better look. That's when I freaked out and started to hit my husband because I was so scared and my girls were screaming. So we kept on going. I just kept on thinking about its eyes and was afraid. So we wandered if they know it's there and we don't want to get shot looking. Not sure what she means by that. Also noticed, since we saw it, I can't help but wonder if they are like jackrabbits, brown during the summer and white in the winter. Because of the snowstorm each night, it made it impossible to find tracks. The first night they ran the road off into the ditch. The next night they were on their way home. Both nights happened about between 12 and 1 a.m. Environment, she says, from where it crossed the road, it was a mountain ridge, a swampy area. Between where it was headed was a hill going to pines. Then beyond it was fields and woods again. No follow-up investigation here. But this is an interesting one. It's sort of like a 2-night encounter. The first night, they're not really seeing anything, but you have guys who are hunters. They're in the woods. They're hearing something approaching their truck. This is November. There's snow on the ground. We can probably rule out bears. You can never fully rule out bears. Not all of them hibernate at the same time. Not all of them go into the full hibernation. They go into what's called a torpor. But you have this thing the second night. They're seeing this thing about 10 feet tall. It's climbing over a fence. It's got its foot on the fence. Its other hand is pushing the wire down. They're seeing arms. They're seeing legs. She says it's like a huge man, 10 feet tall, long fur. They're seeing the face, the eyes. They're glowing a yellow/amber, which I've mentioned in previous episodes. Bears have a yellowish amber eye shine, light orange, but in that realm of yellow, amber, orange. But this doesn't sound like a bear to me. I mean, they're all seeing it. They're screaming. It's white with like these yellow streaks in it. Very strange. I like her theory, though, that maybe the Bigfoot color changes with season. And other people have mentioned this as well, especially in places like the Northeast, the Northwest, where you have, hot summers and cold winters. Down south, you may not have such a drastic change, but it is interesting to wonder if these things, if they get lighter in the winter. Jackrabbit is very different than a large undiscovered primate. But it's an interesting theory nonetheless, and I wanted to throw that out there because, again, we've heard about white Bigfoot creatures in New England before. In my episode on Rhode Island, I think like every story but one in that episode had like a white Bigfoot creature. They were all very light colored, white or blondish or gray, but like white. You weren't hearing the brown or the black or the dark red. It's all white. So I will link to that episode down below if you want to just sort of cross reference those sightings. But I thought it was really interesting that, here another New Englander is seeing a white Bigfoot. Very strange, very cool Bigfoot sighting here. White Bigfoot in Vermont. So let me know what you guys think of this one. Like I said, there's no follow-up here, but I do think it's interesting that it happened 2 nights in a row around the same time, around the same place. So it's almost like this thing is hanging around the area. When the car broke down, it was like approaching to kind of figure out what was going on and got chased off by the tow truck. But then the second night, this thing is staring them down. So not that it was expecting them per se, but I think if it knows that cars are on the road, it was maybe checking out some cars. So a very cool encounter, very cool Bigfoot sighting. And so let's move on to the next one. Okay, so now we're moving into Lamoille County, and this just, hello, Lamoille, hello, Lamoille. Like Squiggy from Laverne and Shirley, or Lamoille from Seinfeld. So Lamoille, again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing this. I checked online. This is how they said to say it, Lamoille. But I'm sure you guys will let me know if it's wrong. This is a daylight sighting of a Bigfoot near North Branch Lamoille River in Eden. This comes to us from August 6, 2019, so summer, Lamoille County, Vermont. The exact details have been removed from the report. Person clearly doesn't want people knowing where this is. Nearest town is Eden, Vermont. Nearest road is Route 118 and observed. So the witness says the sighting was today, 8/6/19 at 10:15 a.m. at our Vermont summer cabin. I am 67, a retired RN and former private pilot with excellent vision. 2015, so I was not mistaken. It was not a bear. We have had a bear here by the deck, so I know what bears look like standing up to reach the feeder. And I've talked about this in previous episodes too. I mean, you don't have to be this rugged outdoorsman, Grizzly Adams type to know what a bear looks like. You just, we all know what bears look like. We all know when we're looking at something that's not a bear, especially when you get a good look at it. Again, something fleeting, running through the woods, dark, and it's 100 yards away, and you're just seeing brown fur. Maybe it was a bear, but you're seeing something closely. We all know what a bear is and what a bear isn't. So she continues, it was a sunny day. My small Chihuahua mix was out front in her cage. She was barking, so I walked out to the front deck and looked towards the dirt road where she was looking. We stood approximately 125 feet from the road. I saw a very black humanoid shape walking on two legs go past our driveway. It was half bent over, then straightened up. It had long arms swinging. The head was turned away and appeared to have a very short neck and roundish head from that angle. I said to myself, that looks like a chimp. I watched it for about 12 seconds until it disappeared behind trees going east on the road. There are spots that I can see through the trees to the neighbor's drive, so I was looking for it to either go up the drive or continue on the road. When it did not, I walked out to the end of the drive, approximately 200 feet, with my air horn. There was nothing on the road for some distance. So she's probably initially thinking this is a person. You're seeing a humanoid. You're seeing something walking on two legs. It's swinging its arms. It looks like a chimp. Maybe she's thinking an escaped exotic pet. Things happen when human beings see things that they can't explain, and our brains try to work it out. And that can happen very quickly sometimes. Sometimes it takes a little longer. Anyway, she continues. Later in the day, I went out to that area with my small dog. She refused to even walk and was trembling. This is the same dog that almost went through a screen door to attack the bear by our feeder a few weeks ago. I noticed an area of bent weeds that would have been where the creature had exited our woods, going into a small ditch, then back up to get onto the road before walking past our drive. On the roadside, in the direction I saw it going, there were 3 barefoot heel depressions with faint toe marks, approximately 12 inches long. The area was dry with fine gravel, so not a clear print. So it's making a print, but it's in gravel, so it's not really capturing detail. But I do want to point out too, like, pay attention to your animals. You know your animals, and some people have dogs that are afraid of everything. So if they're afraid of the Bigfoot, it's not really, evidence of anything. It's not really an interesting characteristic. Same if they go after everything and they're going after the Bigfoot. Like, if their behavior is consistent, it's hard to say this is something different. But she's saying that her Chihuahua was barking at a bear, something much larger. Bear, even a small black bear could eat a Chihuahua in one bite. Nope. So for this dog to be acting differently tells me that this was not something it was used to encountering. So let us move on. The week before, I heard twigs snapping and weeds moving behind my fenced garden. This is approximately 40 feet from the front porch where I often sit. The dog barked. The noise stopped, then started again, so I fired off my air horn, which I always have near after an encounter with a large coy wolf, so coyote/wolf. The cabin sits about 100 feet above the North Branch Lamoille River. There are many snowmobile and ATV trails, plus the long trail is only about 1/5 of a mile away. It was very wooded and remote, a few homes and camps on our road. So this was about 10:15 a.m., sunny, dry day, heavy woods on the side of the dirt road. There are 3 driveways within 200 feet to different cabins. So there are people around. Again, I'm guessing she felt when she first saw this that it was a person or an escaped chimp or gorilla or orangutan, something like that. We have a lengthy BFRO investigator follow-up investigation report here by Jeff Shepard, who says, I did a site visit on 9/28/19 with the homeowner in redacted, Vermont, to discuss her daytime encounter from August 6th. We discussed her experience, and she gave me a tour of her property and the surrounding area where she had her sighting and has experienced other unusual happenings. The property owner was very cordial and felt the need to share her experiences. She gave background information on the geography of the local area, as well as animals native to her surroundings, including the visit by a bull moose just hours before my arrival. So big animals in the area. You have bear, you have moose, you have coyotes and wolves. Interesting. On the morning of the sighting, she had her pet chihuahua outside in a large metal cage/kennel due to her previous run-in with a large coyote wolf when she heard it starting to growl. So she wants the dog outside, but there's predators out there and they will easily take a chihuahua. Upon hearing the growling, she went outside to make sure the coy wolf had not returned. She noticed the direction her dog was looking and heard something walking in the woods between her property and the neighbor's lot next door. She thought it was probably a deer, as they have been seen cutting through the side of the property in the past. Both she and her dog were following the sound of the footsteps as they headed towards the dirt road in front of her home. To her surprise, instead of seeing a deer walk past the end of her driveway, she saw a slightly hunched over black figure step out of the drainage ditch into her driveway. What caught her attention was how it was walking on two legs and the length of its arms in relation to its body. Unfortunately, it never looked in her direction, as it was looking across the road towards the forest on the other side, so she did not see its face. Very interesting. We hear this a lot too, that these Bigfoot, they'll cross a road or they'll just be doing what they're doing. And even though there's people around, they don't look at them. They just kind of are laser focused on where they're going. And it's almost like they're just not aware of their surroundings, which I find hard to believe, but this is what we keep hearing. So I don't know what to make of that. She then repositioned herself on her porch to look through an opening in the trees toward a neighbor's house diagonally across the road to try to catch another glimpse of the creature. After waiting a number of seconds and not seeing the creature pass, she quickly got an air horn and went out to look up the road to see if she could see where it went. At that point, she came to the realization that what she had seen was a Bigfoot. So, not a person. It's one of those things, her mind is trying to sort this out, and she comes to the realization that it was probably Bigfoot. Not seeing anything, she went to her neighbor's house to ask if he had anyone staying with him or had seen anyone walking down the road. So she's still even kind of like, maybe this was a person. He didn't have anyone staying at his home, and he did not see anyone or anything that morning. He did mention that a bear had been around recently and gotten into his garbage. It appears the creature had entered the woods on the opposite side of the road between the homeowner's house and her neighbor's. When asked if it could have been a bear, she said she was positive that it wasn't a bear. Again, people know what bears look like. She's very familiar with bears due to the number of bears that have been in her yard and on her property. She has seen bears standing up in her garden, and their arms and legs were much shorter in relation to their bodies than the creature she saw cross her driveway. And again, bears, they can stand on their hind legs, but they don't really walk any significant distance on those hind legs. A step or two, maybe three at the most. They're not walking on hind legs. They stand up to look at things, to reach things, and sometimes as an intimidation tactic, but that's it. While investigating, the homeowner and her husband found matted grass in the drainage ditch at the edge of the road where something had walked. They found 3 footprints in the hard dirt at the bottom of their driveway and on the road. Due to the surface composition, they were barely visible other than a heavy heel strike and some toe impressions. So they're seeing that something is kind of coming down and disrupting the gravel. She was able to approximate the being/creature's height as around 6 foot tall, give or take, by having her husband standing the sighting location. And distance can be just very hard to estimate a lot of the time. So you have to kind of pick a landmark or a tree branch and then go back later and say, yeah, its head was about here, or it was above this, or it was below this. Not long after that, on August 16th, 2019, while out hiking along the road, the homeowner came across a hollow tree and struck it 3 times with her hiking stick. To her surprise, she got a response back from across the river that runs behind her property. Intrigued, she did it again and got 6 responses to the 10 knocks she did. This made her nervous, and she decided against continuing. Not a big fan of the tree knocks, and we'll get into that. On another occasion, on September 19th, while walking on the road through a very dense section of pine trees about a half mile from her home, she encountered something throwing rocks up into a tall pine tree, knocking pine cones to the ground. Staying very quiet, she stood watching as rock after rock kept knocking large pine cones to the ground. So this is strange. The tree knocks, that could be anything. That could just be somebody on the other side of the river just doing the same thing and answering her. It doesn't mean it was Bigfoot. You can't see what's doing it. You have to assume it's another person. But these rocks being thrown at a pine cone. Whatever was throwing the rocks was on the other side of the tree in thick overgrowth across a small stream. A neighbor drove up the road and stopped to say hello. The woman was a little scared at this point, and with her neighbor there, it gave her the courage/opportunity to quickly make her way back home. So the rock throwing stuff, that is always weird to me. Could it be a person? Of course. And again, we're talking possibility versus probability. Anything's possible. It's possible it was a ghost. It's possible an alien beamed down to Earth and was throwing rocks. Is it possible? Sure. How probable is it? Same thing with a person. I can't imagine somebody sitting in the brush and throwing rocks up at a tree when there's people around. Just very strange. And I'm not saying that means it was Bigfoot. It's just, how probable are these things? The following day, she returned with her husband, only to find the pine trees in this section of the forest had no pine cones on them, and there were none on the ground. It appeared that whoever/whatever knocked the pine cones down had collected them and taken them from the area. The homeowner is a retired nurse and private pilot. So again, this sort of shatters the skeptic, debunking, and insulting ways that they talk about witnesses, whether it's UFOs or Bigfoot or whatever, where they try to make you think that it's always some drunken redneck drinking moonshine who never graduated from the first grade, who can barely spell their own name, and those are the people who see Bigfoot. Those are the people who see aliens. No, I mean, this is a nurse, this is a pilot, this is someone who's trained to observe symptoms in human beings, the body. If you're a pilot, you need to pay attention to instruments and the maneuvering of your plane. This is someone who's not the drunken hick that skeptics will have you believe are the vast majority of Bigfoot witnesses. She and her husband split their time between living in Vermont to be near family and wintering in Florida. They have owned and lived in this part of rural Vermont for approximately 5 years. In that time, they have welcomed, accepted into the community, and others have shared their stories of their Bigfoot encounters or those of their friends. 2 of those sightings have been on or near their road, one being a face-to-face encounter by a local hunter a few miles from their home. She also provided me with a newspaper clipping from a local newspaper of other Bigfoot encounters in Vermont, as well as a Bigfoot sighting in a neighboring community. The area where the homeowner and her husband live is a beautiful rural setting, approximately 30 minutes south of the Canadian border. So you can see a picture here. This is a picture of the area. It's just mountainous and wooded and beautiful, beautiful area. I'd love to get up to Vermont. So he says he thinks the witness is very sincere and credible. And I think so too. An interesting sighting here. She's a nurse. She's a pilot. She's familiar with bears. There's been bears on her property. Anybody who lives in bear territory, you'll wake up some mornings and there's a bear in your backyard. There's a bear walking down the street. It happens. They venture into civilized areas. And this doesn't even sound like a neighborhood. It just sounds like a small collection of cabins that are built nearby to each other. So she's seen bears before. Bears don't walk like human beings. Even if they walk on 2 legs, if you've ever been to the circus, if you've ever seen a trained bear walking on 2 legs, they're kind of like big toddlers. They're not really stable. Like I said, when they do walk on 2 feet, it's usually to reach something in a tree, to look over something. They're not walking on 2 legs. And she said it looked like a chimp. So primate-like, monkey-like, tall, about 6 feet, nothing huge, but she's seeing this thing walking through the neighborhood. Very strange, very, very strange. So a lengthy sighting here, a lengthy follow-up investigation, but I like when there's those details added. This is why we need to question everything. And the other sightings, and there are allegedly some other sightings in the area. Hunters had seen stuff and other sightings on that road, which tells me that this creature or these creatures are using that road. Really interesting. So a good sighting here. Okay, so our next Bigfoot sighting from Vermont, Lamoille County. High-pitched vocalizations heard near Morrisville. This comes to us from witness KJR. So this was in the summer of 95 or 96. They say the incident occurred 2 to 3 miles outside of Morrisville Village in a field just off the road. And observe, the witness says, this story takes place about 1995 at my uncle's cabin in Morrisville, Vermont. I had been visiting on a summer day with my aunt and uncle. They have a small hand-built cabin in Morrisville, which they have had since the early 70s. They are only there infrequently, so similar events may have occurred there that they are not aware of. So they're not there all the time. They just kind of visit. The cabin itself sits in the middle of an open field on a small plot of land, about 1 acre, sandwiched between two farms. They are located on the far side of each. The nearest house is about 3/4 of a mile away. The field is bordered on the other two sides by a dirt road and a heavily wooded ridge. So this one summer day, I had been up to the cabin for a visit, and we were winding down after dinner inside the cabin. My uncle noticed a noise in the far distance, and upon listening, my aunt and I noticed as well. Listening, I can only describe this high-pitched sound as exactly like that of a child screaming as if they were being torn in half. I know that sounds morbid, but that's all I can think of to accurately describe this sound. It was blood-curdling. We continued to listen, and we noticed that the noise was both continuing and getting closer, although it was coming from at least 3/4 of a mile away at the top of the ridge. My uncle and I went outside to figure out what was going on. My uncle is a lifelong hunter and rabid outdoorsman. This guy knows more about the New England wilderness than Grizzly Adams. So, another Grizzly Adams reference for you, 2 in 1 episode. He told me at that point that the noise was definitely animal, was getting closer, and running down the ridge at what he estimated to be about 20 miles an hour, screaming as it went. He said he'd never heard anything like it in his life. Being a very conservative guy, he guessed it might be a jackrabbit, who makes some very odd noises when in mating season. No joke. And this is true. You have fox, you have bobcats, you have jackrabbits, fisher cats. You have all sorts of animals in the woods that can make these like blood-curdlingly terrifying screams. And people describe it as like, yeah, like a woman getting murdered or a child in distress. Really spooky, creepy sounds. But we'll continue. Well, whatever this thing was running toward us, still at a comfortable distance, maybe a quarter mile. Now, keep in mind, this is the middle of nowhere at probably 11 p.m. We had one lantern in the cabin, and other than that, it was pitch black out. We heard dogs barking at this thing, and my uncle noted that this thing was going from house to house on the ridge, waking up dogs, and particularly seemed to bother one home of a man who raised German shepherds. He gathered this from the scream's direction and the intensity of the dogs barking, and that this was an odd thing for a jackrabbit to do. So, yeah, to pause again here, if you do have one of these smaller animals, a fox, a fisher, a jackrabbit, when they make these screams, it's usually kind of one and done. They don't go on and on and on and on like this is happening for 10, 15, 20 minutes at a time, moving from house to house. I mean, that in itself is just really creepy. Why is this thing going from house to house? Very strange. My uncle asked my aunt at this point for his pistol and a flashlight, and we stood on the porch listening to this thing run around for 15 minutes. Then it started right toward us. Maybe it saw the cabin. I asked my uncle if maybe we should go inside, to which my uncle said not to worry as we were well armed. The screaming had started and stopped a few times during this incident, and we were calculating its position by that. Well, that thing, whatever it was, got within 100 feet of us, screamed, stopped for a minute, turned and ran fast the other direction. All we could make out was a dark shape and a pair of eyes reflecting our light about 4 foot off the ground. It then headed straight down the valley and continued to wake up dogs, screaming as it went. We never did find out what it was. The hair on the back of my neck stands up thinking about it even now. Also noticed, I have no knowledge of anything else unusual happening in regard to this incident. The field was high, thick grass, and while you could tell something had run through fast, there were no footprints or hair. So it's just the witness, the uncle, the aunt. They just finished eating and talking in the cabin. So this is a weird one. And again, I don't usually like the vocalizations. Again, as I mentioned earlier with the tree knocks, I sort of feel like if we don't see what is doing this, making these noises, whether it's tree knocks, whether it's howls, we can't say, oh, that was Bigfoot. We don't know. You're out in Salt Fork in Ohio and you're banging on trees. There's probably 16 other Bigfoot hunting groups out there that night doing the exact same thing, and you're all just talking to each other. Same thing with these howls. I think there is just so many animals in the woods that can make these sounds, and even if they don't normally do it, it could be an animal in distress. It could be something that's injured or sick, making these blood-curdling sounds, and you don't know that it's Bigfoot. And I like that this witness never once says this was Bigfoot. They're just saying whatever it was, this creature, this animal, clearly not a person. The behavior is unusual for a smaller animal. They don't really get a good look at the creature. They see some eye shine, they see a shape. They're saying that the eyes are about 4 feet off the ground, which is not terribly tall, especially if you're considering Bigfoot, but it's also higher than you would think if it were a fox or a Fisher cat or a jackrabbit. It's kind of in between. And again, at night, judging distance and height and all these things and any sort of detail is very difficult. So, not sure what to make of this one. I'm including it because I did see something, and as well as the behavior of this creature, the fact that it's going from house to house, that it's screaming and screaming for 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Very strange behavior. Again, I'm not going to call this one Bigfoot. I don't know. It's a little too vague, but I think there's enough strangeness here to say let's throw it in this episode because it's weird enough to get the conversation going and say maybe they did see something or experience something strange. If not Bigfoot, what? I don't know. Puckwudgie, Pigman, Big Head, I the hopping horror, who knows? Any one of the weird Vermont cryptids. But yeah, let me know what you think of this one. Again, I'm a little on the fence with this, but I think it's weird enough to warrant inclusion in this episode. All right, one more Bigfoot story from Vermont, again, Lamoille County, December 1989. So it's winter. 20 miles south of Jay Peak off of Route 100. Nearest town is Eden. Again, I like sort of the collateral evidence. This one is not really a sighting, but again, near Eden. This is submitted by witness Guy Primo on Saturday, December 6, 1997. And he says, observed footprints in the snow, at least 6 feet, heel to toe. I think he means 6 inches. But we'll get into that as the numbers change a little bit here. Something walked over a small tree that still had dead leaves on it. No leaves fell to the ground. So it didn't bump into the tree. It didn't go through the leaves and knock some on the ground. I touched the tree and leaves fell to the ground. My hair stood on end. Also noticed, my dog's hair was standing on end. She would not stop barking. Whatever came through my land, we just missed it by minutes. The prints were at least 12 to 14 inches in length and about 6 inches wide. So I think that's what he was kind of referring to earlier, not 6 feet, but 6 inches. It was not snowshoes or 2 rabbits. My dog has never barked like this before. The other witnesses were himself, his wife, 2 children, and the family dog. They went into the woods to cut a Christmas tree in 2 feet, 6 inches of fresh snow. So that's a lot of snow. The footprints came up a ridge across the pond we were standing on and off into a hemlock grove in a pine forest at the end of my land. No houses around for 10 miles to the north of this pond. Again, I don't usually like footprints, especially in snow. I think there's just too much room for error. The snow can melt, snow can get distorted. It's not like mud, where if you step a bare footprint in mud, it's going to hold that fairly well. Snow can crumble. It depends on, is it a heavy snow? Is it a light powdery snow? Is it a wet snow? But this one I think is interesting just because it was fresh and they would have noticed somebody walking through. And snowshoes are not going to go through the snow like that. People know what snowshoes are on their property. The dog barking, again, the footprints in and of themselves are not really impressive to me. It's the surrounding stuff that always makes me sort of take notice. And again, as I mentioned earlier, pay attention to your animals. Why was their dog going crazy over just footprints? The dog shouldn't even really notice that there were footprints, but it's almost like it sensed something or smelled something. Not sure. The prints are pretty big, 12 to 14 inches long. That's typical. 6 inches wide. This is kind of what we hear in Bigfoot footprints. 2.5 feet of fresh snow. That's a lot of snow. And, people who live in snowy areas, they know what snowshoe prints look like versus footprints. And there's not another house around for 10 miles. Like if somebody had walked through, you'd see them. You could just look and follow the footprints and be like, oh, there's somebody out there. They're not seeing anything. So interesting. Again, I can't say this was definitely Bigfoot, but the corroborating evidence, the collateral stuff sort of makes me wonder, why was the dog barking? Who would have been out there snowshoeing in the middle of nowhere? They're out just trying to cut a Christmas tree. very strange, not bear prints. So you're either talking snowshoes or undiscovered primate. Again, I'm on the fence about this one, but let me know what you guys think. If you have thoughts on if these were snowshoes or not. Again, I include it because it's in the area, it's near Eden. It sort of, you know, links up with the other stories, but I don't know what to make of this. Again, I don't typically like footprints, but, and again, I wish there were some photos here of the footprints, but this was 1989. They probably didn't have cell phone cameras on them. I know they didn't. They're not time travelers. So, yeah. All right, everybody. So there are some Bigfoot sightings in Vermont, one of the least touched New England states by me so far. I've done pretty much like Bigfoot and UFOs and the other places. Haven't really touched Vermont. I would like to do like a champ episode at some point, Lake Champlain monster. Haven't gotten to it yet, but yeah, Vermont has some weird cryptids. I will link to that video again down below so you guys can check out that episode of just really bizarre cryptids in Vermont. Not a ton of Bigfoot sightings up there that I could find, but very similar to Maine. I did a Maine episode a few weeks ago, Bigfoot sightings in Maine. And very similarly, you're not finding a lot of sightings reported there. And even the witnesses who were recording their sightings on the BFRO website had said, you know, Mainers don't really share a lot of this information. We kind of keep this close to the vest. So, and even some of the stories tonight we heard where the neighbor heard other people mentioning Bigfoot being seen in the area or their sightings of Bigfoot, but they don't report it. And it's one of those things where you got to figure how many Bigfoot sightings are there on the internet? And you got to remember what percentage of people who see Bigfoot actually go online and report it. It's a very small percentage. So however many thousands of reports are on the BFRO, you got to figure, multiply that by 100 probably as to how many people actually see something they can't explain, see, you know, quote unquote Bigfoot. But yeah, I'll wrap it up there, everybody. If you have a request that you want me to do your state, your county, your town, shoot me an email, jason@oddanduntold.com. I'm very happy to take listener requests, as this episode is. But yeah, remember, everybody, question everything. Question, were these snowshoe prints, or was it Bigfoot? Was that a guy walking down her street, or did she see Bigfoot? And I like that she tried to debunk that. She went and asked the neighbor, hey, do you have anybody staying with you? I saw a strange man walking down the street. Was that Bigfoot, or was that just your Uncle Hank? You know, like, who knows? So yeah, question everything, everybody. And until next time, embrace the weird, stay weird, and we will have more sightings next week. So rock and roll, everybody. Vermont is home to